Jeffcock Road, Wolverhampton, and the entrance to Graiseley Allotments. We have a main path up to the trading shed and wide paths leading to the left and the right. Mysterious barrow paths lead off, with some plots still enclosed by high hedges. It's early summer 2018, and this is the 100th growing season of the Society. But how did it all start? Well, the minutes of the company commenced in February 1918, and it was during the winter of 1917-18 that the Society was formed. There are no records from that winter, but it's possible to make some fairly strong deductions. This is the West End Working Men's Club in Merridale Street West, Wolverhampton. The minutes show that initial meetings of the committee and general meetings were held here. It is likely then that the idea germinated from some sort of gardening club based here. How though did the members obtain the land? Enter Councillor William Mosley of Graiseley Ward. He lived at 132 Merridale Street and kept the public house, the Golden Cup. 132 was at the top of Merridale Street, near its junction with Worcester Street. It was demolished for the widening of the Pen Road and construction of the Ring Road and Pen Road Island. Williamson Street is now the entrance to the Mercedes garage. The Merridale public house is still there, and what was St Paul's Church Hall still remains. Like 132, all the other buildings have either been demolished or disappeared when the Ring Road was constructed in the 60s. Sunbeam World, though, is still there and undergoing regeneration. It is my assumption that Councillor Mosley knew of the allotment aspirations, and he would also know, being a councillor, that Birch's Barn Farm was to be sold off. It is probable then that he encouraged the members of the gardening club to purchase some of this land for an allotment site. This went through during the winter of 1917-18, and in February 1918 the Graiseley and District Cooperative Allotment Society came into existence. We now move to Stubbs Road, Wolverhampton, and on the corner of Checker Street is the imposing Copeland House. This was the home of Samuel Tonks, the managing director of a brass foundry. He was one of the first church wardens at St Chad's Church, where members of the society would have been in the congregation. Later minutes of the company indicate that he and Councillor Mosley made loans to the society, presumably to help facilitate obtaining the mortgage. The land the society purchased was a triangular piece at the Stubbs Road end of the Birch's Barn Farm site, along with, as we saw, a building plot for access. The outer portion, bordering Jeffcock Road and Birch's Barn Road, was sold off as separate building plots, and the apex of the triangle became the Penfields shopping parade. This 1920s photograph, taken from Stubbs Road, illustrates what the area looked like and towards the society's land before any shops or houses were built. The development of the society until the mid-50s onwards is largely documented in minute books. A record of all the committee and general meetings. There seems to be very little in the way of photographic records. There is a complete set from the first meeting on February the 22nd, 1918 to the 13th of October 1998. Going through them, it is worth looking at some of them to see how things progressed. The first page of minutes is rather mundane, referring to pea sticks and a base 2 shillings coin that was counted as a bad debt. Soon after that first meeting, a resolution was passed to open a limited company account at Lloyd's Bank with 3 trustees. With 2018 also being the centenary of the ending of the First World War, there is a poignant minute expressing condolences to Mr. Tunstall for the loss of his son killed in action. He served in the Durham Light Infantry and died on the 10th of June 1918. The family lived in Cardiff Street. A special meeting in August 1918 was informed about a generous offer by Mrs. Lorry of a silver cup to be presented every year to the holder of the best plot, the offer coming via Mr. Durham. The eventual cost of the trophy being £26. That's around £1,300 today. The Lorrys lived at Bellencroft House, a large house in Bills Lane, Merry Hill. All that remains of Bellencroft House are 2 gateposts and a section of wall. The area has been developed for housing and is now Bellencroft Gardens. The family owned a glass bevelling business in Walsall Street at its junction with St James Street, near the centre of Wolverhampton. It could well be that the go-between Mr. Durham was an employee of theirs, and getting to hear of this fledgling allotment society, they decided to give it some support. The cup is still presented today. In subsequent years, the family donated a rose bowl and a fruit bowl, still being presented for 2nd and 3rd places. In the mid-20s, AGMs and general meetings moved to Bingley schools. I suspect that a meeting of 60 to 70 members at a licensed premises was becoming difficult to control. July the 18th, 1927 was a significant date for the Society. At a general meeting, it was recorded that it was free from debt. The Mayor, Alderman Myatt, was present and congratulated the Society on its achievement. The Express and Star reported on the meeting and that the original purchase price of £1,417 for the land and £45 for the building plot had been paid off. 2 names, apart from the eventually Alderman Mosley, stand out in the interwar period. They are Graiseley and Harry Bagley. Graiseley, as we saw, was one of the signatories to the purchase of the building plot, and although only chairman for 2 years, served for a large part of that time on the committee. He lived at 16 Bingley Street. This illustrates what the street may have looked like at that time and how it has changed over the years. He became the first holder of plot 69. Harry Bagley was chairman 4 times for a total of 10 years. Harry lived at 83 Burley Road and became the first holder of plot 76. The Mayor was a regular attender at trophy presentations, one occasion in particular being reported in the Express and Star. This was July the 24th, 1933, when Sir Charles Mander handed over the trophies. Councillor H.A. White also took a keen interest in the Society. A director of the Midland Counties Dairy, he was elected in 1932, was mayor in 1939 and served the ward until 1954. In October 1938, he donated the H.A. White Trophy for the best show of flowers. One of our taps and running water, which today we take for granted, but it wasn't like that in the early days. The first proposal for a water supply came before the committee in April 1925, but turning over the page, the proposal was defeated without being put before the membership. In the autumn of 1929, a further proposal was made. This time, a ballot of the membership was taken. 83 members voted, and the result was announced at a general meeting in January 1930. 24 for the proposal and 59 against. In September 1941, further estimates for a supply were accepted, with construction to start at the earliest opportunity. It was proceeded with, as during that winter a water barrow was purchased from Messrs Hughes and Holmes. From the summer of 1942, members were allowed to hire the water barrow at 3d per half hour, and a lock was to be fitted to the tap to prevent use by the general public. The supply was only to the forecourt. Apart from the provision of a water supply, the only other thing of note to occur during the war years was the death of the now Alderman Mosley in May 1944. Samuel Tonks was one of the chief mourners, and 12 members of the society attended his funeral. Graiseley Allotments had lost the man who had been its president and mentor since its inception in 1918. In 1949, the family presented the society with the Mosley Cup. By 1946, Birches Barn Farm was fully developed. The allotments are well defined, and the Bradmore housing estate is complete. The southern tip of the site became a parade of shops, and in appearance has changed little over the years. 3 names stand out during the post-war period. They are Hugh Thompson, Bernard Carrier and Ray Kirtland. Hugh Thompson took over plot 19 in May 1926. He lived at Elmhurst, 106 Birches Barn Road, and was elected secretary in January 1945. He was to remain in that post until April 1968. For much of that time, it appears he also acted as treasurer and treated the society as his fiefdom, at one point calling committee meetings when he saw fit. In September 1968, the society purchased the H.B. Thompson Memorial Trophy to be presented for the best greenhouse. Bernard Carrier took over from Hugh Thompson, having previously been trading secretary. He and his wife cultivated plots 52 and 53. He lived initially at 16 Laurel Grove, before moving to a new house at 222 Jeffcock Road. He was secretary until March 1986, and then served for a while as president. Ray Kirtland was born in 1931, and by the end of the war he was actively helping on plots. He eventually took over plot 80, but the date isn't recorded. Until he married Mary, he lived at 73 Norfolk Road. He then moved to 200 Jeffcock Road and took over plot 75, the bottom of his garden. One of his first mentions in the minutes comes in October 1957, when his quote for £230 for re-roofing the trading shed was accepted. And Mr H. Lee informed the committee that it was a very satisfactory job. It's still there today. Ray was at this time already on the committee, and from then on, until he died, served as trading secretary, chairman and vice chairman a number of times, and finally as president. Links with the West End Working Men's Club ended in 1947, when the society joined the Bradmore Community Association. Meetings moved to that venue until well into the next century. The second half of the 20th century was one of consolidation. The water supply was extended up the main path in 1951, and the final extension completed in 1958. Materials being purchased and members digging out the trenches. The current brick-built trading shed was built by Messrs Timms and Davis in 1951 for £373, 19 shillings and 7p. Trophy presentations have always taken place in front of the trading shed. These 3 photos are from one such event in the 1950s. George Cheshire on plot 86 and with the lorry trophy in 1954. An interesting point of note is that George never owned the shares. He cultivated the plot for his sister-in-law Emma Reynolds, and it is her name that is recorded in the minutes. When George died in 1968, the family donated the GH Cheshire Cup to be presented annually for the most improved plot. A new sign was made for the Golden Jubilee celebration. This took the form of a dinner in October 1957 at the Woolpack restaurant, part of the retail market building. At the AGM in February 1961, the Secretary announced that George Garrington had presented the Society with a new silver trophy. It's now awarded for 4th place. There are no other references to Mr Garrington in the minutes, and he doesn't appear to have served on the committee or in any office. He cultivated Plot 55 and lived on Castlecroft Road. St Chad's Church Hall, venue on numerous occasions for the show of flowers, fruit and vegetables. The original sign, which served to advertise the event outside the hall. These are photos from September 1977, the Diamond Jubilee event. Bert Bradford with some homegrown tobacco. Fred Hubbard and Len Morell at the tombola. Horace Nash, Bill Porter and Jim Thomas with their exhibits. Jack Cotterill examining the homemade wine. Tim Worrell with his next door neighbour. Tim was a multi-time winner of the Lorry Cup. And finally, the two organisers, Chairman Ray Kirtland and Secretary Bernard Carrier. Two more shots of the same show. Bernard and Ray with the trophies, plus Ray and Mary with their ever popular wine and cheese stall. Some video clips of the 1989 show. In the morning, exhibitors set up, and in the afternoon, they find out who's won what. Moving on to 1993, and the same thing is happening. Derek Smith and Bill Jones are featured. And here's the judge at work, examining some beetroot. Ray Kirtland follows on with the placement stickers. The public come into view, and of course, the cheese and wine is in demand. It was back in 1938 that the idea of selling the land first arose. Mr Reynolds rose at the AGM and asked for the members' feelings to be tested. It was in July 1989 that the possibility really came to the fore. A letter had been received from a company interested in buying the land. The figure of 2.5 million was bandied about. After a ballot of members, the principle of a sale was agreed by 69 votes to 23. The Telegraph even ran a column on it, and one or two other companies also got onto the bandwagon. After investigations by a subcommittee, it transpired that the money was never there. The matter dragged on until April 1991. Then, by 67 votes to 22, the members decided to enter into an option agreement with another company, the Society receiving £10,000 as a retainer. The option was never taken up. When the Society was 80 years old, a letter to the editor led to a visit from Peter Rhodes, resulting in a piece in the Express and Star, and the chairman and secretary posing self-consciously with a hoe and fork for the camera. 2004 saw construction work for the installation of toilet facilities. A septic tank was sunk into the ground next to the trading shed. A corner of the shed was partitioned off and fitted out with a toilet and wash-hand basin. The project was the work of the then chairman, Stan Wintrip. I'll just say it's a replacement for previous unhygienic practices. In 2016, Graiseley featured in BBC Midlands Today.
This is January at the Graiseley and District Allotments in Wolverhampton, where the hard work pays off in more ways than one. While Wolverhampton is the allotment savings capital of the UK, on average people with allotments here save around £579 per year. Compare that to the worst place, Aberystwyth, where they save just 52. For Lorna Pod and her wider family, it's a way of life. Toddler Jasper and baby Felix, as well as grandparents Betty and Robin, can often be seen on the plot.
He's grown up here, he's learned to walk, talk, play on this plot, but he's learning about growing veg, about the soil, about plant life and about insects, worms and spiders and things like that.
But for many we spoke to, the money doesn't really come into it.
As part of the Centenary, there was an open weekend, with an open invitation for anyone to come and see the site. A few days before the event, Lorna, on the left, and Steph, the two organisers, held a briefing with some of the volunteers. The gates had been freshly repainted to recognise the anniversary. With the gates open, visitors arrived. The refreshments proved popular. Flower pot men were to be found on quite a few plots. Guests could wander all over the site. Another flower pot man. Plot holders talked about their plots and the sort of crops they were growing. And here's another one, mimicking the nursery rhyme. Normal work still goes on. How many more are there? Former plot holder and long-time committee member Tom Brewy. You can't get away from them. A display from the Central Youth Theatre. The Society helped them with a project. These knitted veg are better than what I can grow. At least this flower pot man is trying to do something useful. Allotment gardening isn't all hard work. I don't recognise the strip. I wonder who he does play for. This flower pot man has got a nice smile. The entrance to plot 41 had been decorated for the visitors. Jackie Petrick, Steph Twilley and Chairman Pete Twilley in conversation with some guests. Now he's got the right idea. Shelter in the greenhouse. And for those who can remember, is this meant to be little weed? Oh well, the weekend's over. Now is it time to start planning for the next one? The Centenary Year Awards took place in the middle of September. Members and friends gathered in front of the trading shed as is customary. Trading Secretary Phil Lidster and Chairman Pete Twilley passed the time of day. All the Society's silverware was on parade. To use the well-used phrase, and the winners are... The smoke from the barbecue is much in evidence. Jackie Petrick and Sally Hilton are in charge, and the food starts to arrive. It's the start of autumn 2018. Graiseley's centenary growing season is coming to an end. The Society will enter its second century in good order. A new generation will take it forwards. But what is the future of allotment gardening? Well, some residents of Morland Smith near Falmouth have negotiated the use of a field owned by the National Trust just outside the village, and plots are being cultivated. They now have water, only for filling water butts though, and a shed. The future looks bright for them, and we wish them well.